Tonight we begin slowly, not with cities, empires, or maps, but with footsteps. Long before writing existed, and long before history had a name, people moved across the land. They walked carefully and slowly, following animals, rivers, and the warmth of the sun. There were no roads. There was only land. Each step pressed into the ground, and the earth remembered. Soft soil changed shape. Dust settled. Clay hardened beneath repeated movement. At first, one person walked, then another, then many. Season after season, the same route was used again. Over time, the path remained. These early paths were not straight. They curved naturally around stones and trees, followed hills and valleys, and stayed close to water. No one designed them. No one measured them. No one owned them. They existed because people existed. Walking was slow. A journey of 20 kilometers could take an entire day. There was no hurry and no reason to rush. The land decided the pace. Rain slowed movement. Snow stopped it completely. Heat demanded rest. Early roads were shaped by patience, repetition, and survival. This is where roads truly begin, not in stone or power, but in footsteps. As time passed, small camps became villages. Villages needed connection, a path to water, a path to food, and a path to neighbors became essential. Footpaths slowly turned into routes. They were narrow and fragile, but they were remembered. Memory was stronger than stone. Trade began quietly. Stone, grain, and salt were carried by hand. Everything moved slowly. Every journey mattered, and every step had weight. As routes became familiar, they became trusted. Trust is what turns land into a road. In warm regions, paths hardened under the sun. In wet regions, they turned to mud. People adapted. They laid branches, placed stones, and packed earth, not to move faster, but to move again. A road that survives tomorrow is more valuable than a road that is fast today. In early river valleys, roads slowly changed. In Mesopotamia, between the Tigris and Euphrates, people began shaping the land intentionally. They cleared debris, leveled surfaces, and guided water away. Roads were tools, not monuments. They allowed food to move, people to gather, and messages to travel. A road meant connection, and connection meant survival. Movement was still slow. Travelers walked. Animals carried loads. Carts creaked forward. Days passed. Nights came, and stars watched every journey. Every road was an agreement with nature. You may pass, but only at my pace. Humans listened. They slowed down. They learned patience and endurance. In that slowness, civilization quietly formed. As villages grew into towns, roads became more important. People no longer walked only for survival. They walked to exchange goods, ideas, and traditions. Early civilizations formed near rivers. Water provided food, transport, and fertile land. Roads followed these rivers closely, staying near what sustained life. In Mesopotamia, roads connected farms to markets and temples. They were simple, made of packed earth, but they were essential. Without them, cities could not function. Movement remained slow and deliberate. Donkeys carried loads. Wooden carts rolled carefully over uneven ground. Each journey took time and effort. Roads were not wide. They were just wide enough for passing. When two travelers met, one often stepped aside. Cooperation was built into the road itself. As trade expanded, routes stretched farther. Villages became towns. Towns became cities. Roads linked them together into networks that slowly covered the land. These roads carried more than goods. They carried language, beliefs, and customs. A road was a line of communication between cultures. Travel was still dangerous. Weather, animals, and illness were constant threats. Roads did not promise safety. They only offered direction. Despite the risks, people continued to walk. Connection was worth the danger. Without roads, isolation meant weakness. Civilization moved forward one careful step at a time. As routes became longer, trade became more complex. Goods traveled farther than ever before. What was rare in one place was common in another. Salt moved across dry land. Metals traveled from mountains to plains. Textiles passed from hand to hand, slowly changing with every exchange. Markets formed where roads crossed. These intersections became centers of life. People gathered, talked, argued, and learned. Roads shaped where cities appeared. A settlement near a crossing had an advantage. Movement brought opportunity. Not all roads were controlled by rulers. Many existed simply because people continued to use them. Habit shaped geography as much as power did. In some regions, paths became sacred. Pilgrims walked them slowly, carrying faith instead of goods. Roads became spiritual journeys as well as physical ones. Distance changed how people understood the world. Traveling even a short way revealed different customs and languages. Roads expanded human awareness. Journeys took weeks or months. Travelers slept under open skies. Fires burned quietly at night. Stories were shared in the dark. Roads connected strangers. Over time, strangers became neighbors. Shared paths created shared understanding. The world felt larger, but also more connected. Slowly, quietly, humanity learned that movement created meaning. In the next part, roads will become instruments of power. Empires will rise, and movement will no longer belong only to ordinary people. As civilizations grew, roads became more than simple paths. They were used to control people and goods. Kings and rulers built roads to connect their capitals with distant lands. Soldiers marched along them. Messengers carried orders. Trade flowed under the watchful eyes of those in power. In Persia, the royal road stretched for hundreds of miles. It connected cities and villages. Couriers traveled quickly along its length, delivering messages in days that would have taken weeks before. Inns and stations appeared along the route. Travelers could rest and continue. The road was maintained by the state, not by local communities. It was a tool of administration and authority. Despite its purpose, the royal road allowed ordinary people to travel. Merchants carried goods from city to city. Pilgrims walked it to sacred sites. Soldiers marched to distant outposts. The road served many purposes all at once. Movement was slow, but it was steady and reliable. The construction of these roads was labor-intensive. Workers leveled the land, laid stones, and dug drainage ditches. No machines existed. Human effort alone made the roads possible. Generations maintained them carefully. A single road could last for centuries if used and cared for properly. Over time, roads connected distant regions. Ideas, beliefs, and technologies traveled along them. Culture moved slowly but steadily. People learned from one another. The roads allowed communication across empires. They created networks of understanding. Even as rulers used roads for control, they also became part of everyday life. Farmers transported crops. Craftsmen brought tools and textiles. Families traveled to visit relatives. Roads enabled connection that was both practical and social. Journeys were still long. Travelers slept outdoors or in simple inns. Fires provided warmth at night. Stories were shared while people rested. Roads became a space for learning and observation. Travelers noticed the land, the seasons, and the patterns of human life. Some ancient roads survived only in memory or in buried layers of earth. Archaeologists today uncover these paths and follow them as they existed thousands of years ago. Each stone tells a story of careful planning, patient labor, and slow movement. Even modern highways follow many ancient routes. The land remembers the paths of the past. Roads have always been about connection. They have always been about time and effort. They remind us that slow movement shaped the world. When the Roman Empire expanded, roads became crucial for control and communication. The Romans built straight, durable roads across vast distances. Soldiers moved quickly. Messages traveled faster than ever before. The empire depended on these roads to function. Construction was meticulous. Layers of stones, sand, and gravel were carefully laid. Roads were slightly raised in the middle to allow water to drain. Bridges were built over rivers. Every detail mattered. A well-constructed road could last for centuries. Roman roads were designed for endurance, not speed alone. These roads connected cities, military forts, and ports. Merchants used them to transport goods. Farmers traveled to urban markets. People could travel farther than previous generations. Roads linked distant cultures within the empire. They brought Rome closer to its provinces. Along the roads, milestones marked distance. Inns and rest stations provided shelter. Travelers could plan journeys with more certainty. The roads made the empire seem smaller and more manageable. People relied on them for safety and predictability. Movement became organized. Roman roads were not only tools of military power. They spread ideas and culture. Language, religion, and law traveled along the roads. Scholars, artists, and teachers moved from city to city. Knowledge spread slowly but steadily. Roads allowed people to meet, exchange ideas, and influence one another. Trade expanded as roads reached more regions. Goods that were rare in one area became common elsewhere. Food, tools, and textiles traveled across continents. Roads enabled economic growth and prosperity. They supported markets, towns, and cities. Daily life depended on them. Even after the fall of the Roman Empire, many roads continued to serve communities. Local people maintained what they could. Paths that once carried armies now carried merchants and pilgrims. Roads endured. They remain the arteries of human connection. The Roman example shows how roads shaped civilization. They connected distant lands, enabled trade, and spread knowledge. Roads were more than paths. They were tools of control, networks of communication, and instruments of culture. They moved humanity slowly, steadily, and persistently. After the fall of the Roman Empire, many roads fell into disrepair. Some were abandoned. Others were maintained locally. Villages and towns depended on them for survival. Roads connected people to markets, neighbors, and fields. Life slowed down. Travel became less predictable. People moved carefully, knowing the dangers of the road. Medieval roads were often narrow and uneven. Mud, stones, and ruts made journeys difficult. Donkeys, horses, and carts carried goods slowly. Travelers had to plan their trips around weather and daylight. Roads were part of daily life. They shaped when and how people moved. Journeys required patience and preparation. Roads connected churches, monasteries, and castles. Pilgrims traveled to holy sites. Merchants transported goods from town to town. Roads were lifelines. They allowed communication, trade, and culture to continue despite political instability. Roads remained essential for communities that depended on them. Trade slowly expanded along medieval roads. Markets formed at crossroads. Towns grew where roads met. Goods such as cloth, grain, and tools moved from village to village. Information traveled along these same routes. News, ideas, and customs spread. Roads connected people over long distances, even if travel was slow. Maintenance was mostly local. Villagers repaired bridges, filled holes, and cleared debris. Roads survived because people relied on them. Each journey contributed to the care of the road. Movement and upkeep were connected. Roads remained central to life. Travel was dangerous but necessary. Thieves, wild animals, and bad weather threatened travelers. People took precautions. Slow and steady movement kept them safe. Roads shaped not only trade but the rhythm of daily life. The medieval road was a space where survival, commerce, and communication met. In the late Middle Ages, roads began to support longer journeys. Travelers explored new regions. Merchants carried goods to distant cities. Pilgrims walked to sacred sites. Roads enabled these movements. They connected communities that had been isolated before. Travel remained slow, but it became more regular. Roads were still simple. Dirt paths, uneven stones, and wooden bridges guided travelers. Weather could make travel difficult. Mud and rain slowed carts and horses. People learned to read the land. They followed streams, hills, and valleys. Roads were shaped by the landscape and by centuries of careful use. Maps and guides appeared. Travelers noted distances and resting places. Inns and stations grew along busy routes. Roads became familiar, predictable, and safe. The slow rhythm of travel gave people time to observe and understand the land. Roads guided both movement and thought. Roads allowed messages to travel across regions. Messengers carried letters and news from one town to another. Kings and nobles relied on roads to govern distant lands. Roads connected authority with everyday life. Movement was slow but consistent. Each step carried information and goods. Even ordinary people used roads for communication. Travelers shared news and ideas. Markets became places for conversation as well as trade. Roads created networks of knowledge. Travelers learned customs, languages, and traditions from distant lands. Roads spread culture gradually. They connected lives over time and space. Maintenance remained important. Villagers repaired sections of road. Stones were replaced. Bridges were checked. A well-maintained road ensured that messages, goods, and people could continue moving. Roads were not fast, but they were dependable. They shaped the rhythm of society and the pace of life. During the Renaissance, roads supported increased travel and exchange. Scholars, artists, and merchants moved more often. Ideas traveled slowly along roads, spreading knowledge from one city to another. Roads connected centers of learning and trade. They enabled cultural growth and economic development. Roads were improved gradually. Cobblestones appeared in cities and towns. Bridges were rebuilt with stronger materials. Travelers could move more safely and predictably. Roads shaped how people experienced the world. Journeys became more regular. Travel encouraged observation and understanding. Roads were not merely paths. They were instruments of connection and learning. Trade expanded during the Renaissance. Roads connected towns and cities across regions. Merchants carried textiles, spices, and metals. Markets grew at crossroads and city gates. Goods traveled slowly, but steadily. Roads allowed commerce to flourish. Roads also spread culture. Ideas, art, and books traveled along the same routes. Scholars visited distant cities. Artists sought patrons in new towns. Knowledge moved with travelers. Roads connected people not only physically but intellectually. They became channels of culture and commerce, shaping society gradually over time. In the early modern period, roads became essential for expanding empires. Kings and rulers built roads to connect distant territories. Armies moved along them. Officials traveled to collect taxes and enforce laws. Roads were instruments of control and administration. Construction techniques improved slowly. Paved surfaces appeared in cities. Stone bridges replaced wooden ones. Inns and stations supported long journeys. Roads allowed people and goods to travel farther than before. Travel remained deliberate and careful, but movement was more reliable. Roads also supported trade on a larger scale. Merchants transported goods between regions and countries. Spices, metals, and textiles moved along roads to ports and markets. Information traveled along the same routes. News and ideas spread slowly. Roads enabled both commerce and communication. Even ordinary people used roads for connection. Farmers brought produce to towns. Travelers visited family and friends. Roads shaped the rhythm of daily life. They allowed distant places to interact. Movement along roads created networks of human connection. Roads were both practical and cultural tools. During the industrial era, roads played a new role. Factories and cities expanded. Workers needed ways to move between home and work. Roads carried materials to factories and finished goods to markets. Roads shaped the rhythm of industrial life. Travel was still slow, but it became more structured and predictable. New construction techniques appeared. Gravel and macadam surfaces improved durability. Bridges were reinforced with iron and steel. Roads allowed carts and wagons to carry heavier loads. Inns and way stations adapted to serve more travelers. Roads became arteries of commerce, connecting production and consumption. Movement remained deliberate but more reliable. Roads also enabled better communication. Mail coaches traveled along established routes. Messages reached towns and cities more reliably. Telegraph lines often followed roads, linking distant regions. Roads connected people, information, and goods. Even ordinary travel continued. Farmers brought crops to markets. Merchants carried wares to towns. Families visited relatives in nearby villages. Roads shaped everyday life. They provided structure to movement and connection. Roads were not fast, but they ensured continuity and stability. They allowed societies to function steadily. In the modern era, roads adapted to new forms of transportation. Carriages gave way to automobiles. Roads were widened and paved with asphalt. Travel became faster, but the principles remained the same. Roads connected cities, towns, and rural areas. Movement was more efficient, yet still depended on careful planning. Highways began to stretch across regions and countries. Bridges became larger and stronger. Roads connected factories to markets and ports to inland areas. Travelers could journey farther in less time. Roads supported trade, communication, and everyday life. They remained essential for society to function. Today, roads continue to shape human connection. Vehicles travel along highways, streets, and rural paths. People commute, transport goods, and explore new places. Roads connect communities in ways that were once unimaginable. They carry commerce, culture, and communication. Despite technology, travel is still deliberate. Roads guide movement and interaction. They structure daily life and long journeys. Roads link generations, regions, and nations. They remind us that slow, steady movement shaped civilization. Roads are more than paths. They are the veins of human society. They continue to connect people and ideas, carrying the legacy of centuries of movement. Roads carry more than people and goods. They carry memory. Ancient paths mark the movement of generations. Travelers, merchants, and soldiers have walked the same routes for centuries. Each step left an imprint on the land. Roads hold stories of human life, effort, and connection. In many regions, old roads are still visible. Some follow the same lines as they did hundreds or even thousands of years ago. Archaeologists study them to understand trade, travel, and culture. Roads preserve the history of human movement. They are silent witnesses to time and change. Walking along an ancient road allows reflection. Travelers can imagine the lives of those who came before. Roads shaped settlements, economies, and culture. They guided people slowly across land and time. Each journey, no matter how small, contributed to the connection between communities. Roads remind us that civilization grows gradually. Movement, effort, and patience shape society. Roads are the threads that tie together generations, regions, and ideas. They allow humans to learn, share, and grow. The slow history of roads is the history of humanity itself. Roads are both practical and symbolic. They guide us, connect us, and preserve our past. Today, many ancient roads are preserved as cultural landmarks. People walk or drive along them to connect with history. Museums and guided tours celebrate the paths that shaped civilization. Roads remind us of human effort, persistence, and innovation. They show how slow, steady progress built the world we live in today. Modern highways and streets follow the lessons of the past. Roads connect cities and nations. They facilitate trade, travel, and communication. The principles of ancient road building, planning, durability, and connection remain important. Roads continue to guide humanity, linking past, present, and future. Roads are more than infrastructure. They are a legacy, Every path tells a story of human movement, trade, exploration, and culture. Roads preserve memory, guide progress, and connect people. They remind us that civilization advances slowly, step by step. As we travel along modern roads, we follow the footsteps of countless generations. Roads connect communities, enable commerce, and carry ideas. They are a living history. The slow history of ancient roads shows that movement, effort, and connection define humanity. Roads are timeless. They are the veins through which human life continues to flow.